Welcome for sisters and brothers. This is going to be a solo episode. Today I'm recording on March the 7th of 2023, and we have kicked off Women's History Month. And I just wanted to talk a little bit today about what you can expect this month, what I'm hoping you can expect this month. But first, before we start, just some fun personal news. I am progressing in the college speaking market. So I did get to speak to the University of Michigan Psychology College yesterday, and that is a private university that I just probably butchered the name. And I got to talk to them about women's history and the three things that I learned and believe our foremothers shared while I was going through college as a first generation student. It was such a fun opportunity to engage with students. And of course, things go wrong sometimes, like their electricity went out just before we started. So they couldn't be in college. They had to be at home, and lots of little glitches, but that's life. Still, it was fun to engage. And I'm inviting you to sign up if you like for the Women's Summit. If you listen to this on time, it is going to be on March the 8th. And my tiny little portion of it will be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, there will be a ton of interesting women with their own stories there. So feel free. It is free. It's a free event. I'll put the link in show notes, and don't feel bad if you sign up and can't attend. Nothing bad will happen. You're not going to end up suddenly paying for something that was always free. So anyway, I'll invite you to that. And then I have another event for women's history at the end of the month that I'll share more about later. So that's fun. That's free. And you know, what is less fun and why I think some of this matters so much to me is I had a conversation with my estranged mother. For those of you who follow my book and maybe watch the movie about my life, Stolen by Their Father, you already know that's a tenuous relationship. And so I'm getting older. So my mother is definitely getting older. She is 90. And I think that's right. She's 90 years old. And I've had two siblings die in recent history. And it just makes you think about those final opportunities for conversation sometimes. So, had a very volatile mother who hated being a mom. If I can be perfectly honest, everything in her bones seemed to reflect that she kind of hated the role of being a mother. I get it. I can understand that is not, motherhood is definitely not something for everyone. And not all mothers just naturally fall in love with the role of being a mom. We see that all the time, right? We read the news, we see what happens when people don't want to be parents and do terrible things in response to that. So, it was a volatile upbringing. And I think I was such a pleasing child and I always wanted to be in her favor. And sometimes I was. So she was the kind of mom who picked kids in the family that she was relating to and kind of got rid of the others. Or if she was mad at one, those of us who spoke to the person she was mad at could get in real retaliatory trouble, get hurt physically. But then those who were the ones out of her favor didn't have any contact with the rest of us while all of that was brewing. So I had one sister who was always the target, and we weren't allowed to talk to her at the dinner table. It would go long periods of time before we would speak to her because our mom didn't like her. So it was just a mess. And is there mental health problems? Inevitably, there must be. But our mom was very proud of saying, I will never go to a doctor. I will never be evaluated. I will just pray away my troubles. So that being said, I finally made a decision when I was 30 after my mom had a final episode. You can read about it in the book, Pieces of Me Rescuing My Kidnapped Daughters. But we had a final episode where she just behaved in such a way that was so unbelievable. So I literally said to myself, I can't continue to surround myself with toxic people, controlling people, abusive people. No, I just will not even if it's my mother. So I really stopped having contact with her. And I'm glad that I didn't, swear at her, or cuss her out, or do something ugly. But on the other hand, it was time to stop that relationship. And so I've thought about her, certainly, and I wish her no harm. And I think my siblings, if they were here, would say the same thing. She had 6 kids. Couple of my brothers, she walked out on and took the girls and disappeared, and did not double back, did not try to start a relationship, didn't reach out to them during their birthdays. In adulthood, ignored their prompts for contact. So then she threw out other siblings, and then other siblings fled. And so no one stayed with her the entire 18 years. But that said, I really think about the impact all of our mothers make on us. Maybe they're not the inspiration for who we want to become, depending on their own circumstances, but they influence so much of our lives. And so as my mom was getting older and I'm getting older, I'd get these occasional, albeit annoying, but occasional prompts from some of her relatives that I don't know, who would say, oh, your mother would love to hear from you. Oh, they do it on social media. Oh, your mother, I'm sure she'd really like to get a phone call from you. And I started thinking, if that's true, and if there's room for growth, if there's room for forgiveness or conversation, opening up, I've had podcast guests, you've listened to them here. Chad Peavy recently, that episode with him. Laura Davis, an episode with her, all about difficult relationships with parents, and some that can be fixed, although it may take baby steps and years. As long as we're alive, there's still hope. And I thought about that as I got the final really frustrating message from a relative. And I thought, you know what? If our mother is holding on to something, if she needs to go to whatever happens after we die, if she needs to feel released from any upset or feel forgiven or want to have conversation or want to get mad at me, whatever it is, I should try. I should make that effort. And I think as a person, if you've been rejected by a parent, often it is kids who don't see their dads. It is more socially acceptable to be abandoned by a father. To have your mother be that person, I don't know. It's hard. It is hard to feel like a regular, normal person sometimes. So anyway, I just thought, for a bunch of reasons, I am going to call her. Here's the conversation that I wish that I would have had. Because I called my mom, and I was somewhat thinking about women's history, just thinking about the different things that women have. I don't know, women today take for granted so many rights that our grandmothers, our mothers, our great-grandmothers never had opportunities like we do. And if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have those opportunities. So the conversation I meant to start was after almost 30 years of no contact, hey, Mom, I wanted to reach out and see how you are and create space for dialogue. And I also wanted to let you know that I really see that you had so many talents, have so many talents, and that in a different universe, you could have not been a parent, not been married, chosen to get an education, again, something women from the past didn't have access to birth control, that you could have done something totally different with your talents and felt like you were lit up by the things that you did in your life, that they brought you such joy, and not the shame and not the guilt of fulfilling a role very badly. I wouldn't have said the very badly part to her because she knows that. But you could have had the joy of doing what you wished, or at least pursuing some version of that, instead of inheriting what society expected of you. And for that, I am so sorry that happened. And it was definitely hard on your children, but I am sure it was hard on you. Absolutely confident of that. So that is the conversation I meant to have. For people who listen to the show and for people in general, like, I think a lot of times that we don't understand why there are certain months. Why is there Black History Month? A lot of people ask that question. Why is there Women's History? Well, I can speak only for all, well, I guess they're similar. Why do we have certain months designated? Because history really is, when you look at the word, it is his story broken up, really. It's his story. So when you hear about things like civil rights, when you hear about wars, when you hear about inventions, you mostly hear about the men, mostly white men, who got credit for the things that happened. The Of course, the difference being the civil rights movement, where again, we give people credit, but not all the people credit. So it's important to acknowledge the people who were behind the scenes or right in the scenes who didn't get credit. And I love that for women's history. You know, we celebrate the president's wife in the 1700s, Adams, who said, you know, don't forget about the ladies. When she was talking to her husband about acknowledging in the 1700s that women should have more power and be able to one day have more control over their lives, to vote, to do other things. And we have Sojourner Truth, and we have Betsy Ross, and we have so many people that are super, super famous. But at the end of the day, these are people who were overlooked. And if they're overlooked, they were never thanked. I think of Women's History Month as a time to really reflect also on, let's look at our own lives, the people that motivated us, the women that helped us, whether it was a teacher, maybe it was somebody who wrote a book, maybe it was, you know, somebody who you never met, but who are the top 3 people and women in your life that you can look back on and say, this person really influenced or changed my life. And then what can you do with that information? You know, I found myself recently thinking, because I am all about, it's never too late to thank someone, even if they're already dead. You can do something in their name, make a donation in their name to a charity they believed in, and or if they're still alive, but you've not met them, reach out and touch them. Reach out as best you can and find them. Google search their name, find them on social media, find an address, whatever you need to do, but thank that person. Say, you probably don't remember me, but here's what our interaction, or here's what your work, or here's what your writing did for me. I am so fortunate. So this last couple of weeks, what really happened in the conversation with my mom was she said, after picking up the phone and understanding it was me and calling me evil, and she asked if I called her just to make new content for a new book. And of course, me being a smart aleck, I made a comment that I regretted and then had to double back. But, you know, she ultimately hung up on me after she called me evil. And I think then I found out she'd done that to another sibling of mine recently. And when the other 2 died, 2 more of them died rather, she had no comment about that. So I still felt really good for trying hard to do the right thing, but I could forgive myself and let myself off the hook for feeling guilty about this woman who is spending the last final days alone. And that is her choosing, and that's her right. On the other hand, someday I will write about it, maybe sooner, maybe later, but the conversation I wanted to have remains. And so I reached out to women, to 3 women, in fact, 4 women who have had a huge impact on me. And I am hopeful this month that I can introduce them to you by their voice, by their work, and by what they meant to me. Strong, amazing women, each very different from the other. From one of my university professors who taught literature of Appalachian women, to a pseudo mom, a single Black mother who, it was a mighty phoenix when I was growing up and really showed me how it's done. If you're a single mom, you can still accomplish so much. And she had that added layer of tons of discrimination. And at a generation where women weren't welcomed to more executive positions, she nailed it. And so I'm hopeful. I have my former supervisor, but dear friend, Heather Flynn, who helped me tremendously when my kids were missing, when they were kidnapped by their father as a retaliatory measure for me leaving him. She was phenomenal, a mayoral candidate, assembly member in Alaska, executive director of the nonprofit who served domestic abuse victims and survivors. So, she may be on, these will be short interviews, maybe on camera, maybe it will be recorded, or if we can't get the tech, because me teaching technology to people is, I'm sorry, but this is not my superpower. I am so bad. So when I'm trying to explain how we record Zoom or do this or that, it might not be easy. And so we will see if I get them on, but I want to honor Eleanor Andrews, Heather Flynn, Dr. Virginia Carney, my Literature of Appalachian Women and dear friend who is in North Carolina now, in very bad health, but still to this day making an impact. One of the things as a single welfare mother for myself, when I was on welfare, living in Section 8 housing, had a Pell Grant to attend college and finish, I was at the final stretch. And I was thinking, what am I going to do with my journalism degree? And how can I get off welfare and have a job with flexibility and some money and never be on public assistance again? And I had a dear friend who was talking to me about being a pharmaceutical sales rep. I knew nothing about big pharma, as we call it today, but I knew nothing about pharmaceuticals. And of course, there's some great things about having medication and some things that aren't. But I will tell you what I heard. The only thing that registered back when I was in my 20s was I could make good money, have a flexible schedule to decently parent my children, and be off all kinds of assistance and have fun. And that did sound amazing, amazing. However, at the last moment in my Literature of Appalachian Women class, my instructor came by all of our desks, Dr. Carney, and she dropped off a newspaper article from Lexington, Kentucky. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. Here I was in Alaska, and here's this article in 1990, I'm going to say it was 1991. And it was a Lexington Herald article written by a woman named Maria Henson, a writer who I assumed was super old because I was young and thought everyone successful had to be old. And she had written an article where she literally, and trigger alert, this is alarming, but she let women show their pictures of their disfigured faces. These were victims of family violence or intimate partner violence, where the women had either attempted to get a protective order or gone to police and were largely ignored. In Lexington, Kentucky, which was at that time and maybe still is the most progressive part of Kentucky. And so once she kept hearing about these stories over and over, she, with an amazing editorial team, did a series of articles that took that state to task for their response to domestic abuse survivors. Consequently, laws changed in a nanosecond, and suddenly the world shifted for so many people who needed the help that they deserved to have a safe life within their own home. So I never met Maria Henson. This is why I'm encouraging you. Think about thanking some woman that you don't even know. That work shaped my profession. At that moment, I said I could be paid well, but I will instead do something I'm passionate about. And I went to work as a domestic abuse advocate almost as soon as I graduated college. And I did that for years and still volunteer, do talks and other things to this day. And it changed my life. And I don't even know if I could have survived having my kids kidnapped. If I were in the pharmaceutical sales business, that would have been a different conversation. But I was working with an empowered group of men and women who believed in equality and safety within the home. and believed that I had been unfairly targeted because, and my children, most of all, had been unfairly targeted because I needed safety in the home. So those articles ran in the Lexington Herald Leader, changed my world. A few years ago, I was in Lexington, Kentucky, and I decided to write that, the author, and see if she was, where was she? The writer of these amazing, basically expose articles in the Lexington Herald Leader. Did I mention that she went on to win the Pulitzer Prize for this? This 31-year-old woman she was only 31. Felt endangered herself as she exposed all of the basic corruption that was going on at the time, but she won a Pulitzer Prize for that work. And so I reached out to her a few years ago when I was visiting Lexington and emailed her and just said, hey, this article changed my world. She wrote me back immediately. Lucky for you and for me, she's going to be my guest this next week. So please listen in to Maria Henson talking about what it was like at a young age to just feel so passionately about something that she would risk her own safety. And frankly, women, as she points out, the survivors were the brilliant, brave people who risked their safety by exposing so much to create change for other people. And I just love that interview. Thrills me to death. Hope you'll join me this month, all month long. Share, please. Subscribe to my YouTube if this is where you're watching, or follow the podcast and tell your friends. I could use that. I'd so love it. You can always support me and the podcast by going to my link, buy Elizabeth a cup of coffee. That gives me a little tip, like $5 or something like that, or become a patron and give your $2 a month or whatever to underwrite the costs and have a little closer access to me. Thanks for being here as ever. I appreciate it. I hope you have a fabulous month and that you reach out and start thanking people who made that impact in your life, even if it's just a journal entry to someone that used to live, but that made your world different, better, and enhanced. And take none of our rights for granted. Vote, do all the things, and be grateful, because those hard-won sacrifices should never be forgotten. Have a great week, and thanks for being here.